Picture a group of fishermen standing on the muddy banks of the Sea of Galilee. Their hands are calloused, their backs are sore, and their entire world is defined by the size of their nets. They were doing exactly what their fathers did and exactly what their children were expected to do. It was a life of good enough, predictable, safe, and small. They were busy mending holes in old nets just to catch the same fish they caught yesterday. Then, a man named Jesus walks up to the shore, looks them in the eye and shatters their reality. He doesn't ask them to improve their fishing technique, he tells them to drop the nets entirely. "Follow me," he says, "and I will make you fishers of men." In one sentence, he called them out of a stagnant pond and pointed them toward a vast, uncharted ocean. The biggest tragedy in your life isn't failure, it's being successful at things that don't matter. Too many people are satisfied with just getting by. You have been conditioned to believe that life is about paying bills, avoiding trouble, and surviving until retirement. You are mending nets that are too small for your potential. Real ambition starts when you realize that you weren't put on this earth to be a spectator or a cog in someone else's machine. You have a call beyond the shore. Your talent, your energy, and your time are worth more than a paycheck that just covers your rent. Stop settling for a life that is fine. A fine life is a slow death of the soul. True ambition is the courage to walk away from the safety of the shore to conquer a mission that actually scares you. Your potential is massive, but you will never see it as long as you are clutching that old, ragged net. Drop it, and start swimming for the deep. The situation was a logistical nightmare. 5,000 hungry men, plus women and children, were stranded in a remote place with nothing to eat. The disciples did what most realistic people do. They looked at their bank account and panicked. They found a boy with 5 small loaves of bread and 2 fish, looked at the massive crowd and said, "What is this among so many?" They were using poverty math. They focused entirely on the lack of resources. But Jesus didn't look at the bread, he looked at the hunger. He didn't ask how much they had. He told the crowd to sit down in an orderly fashion. He had the math of a visionary. He focused on the scale of the problem he wanted to solve, not the limitations of the tools in his hand. He took the insufficient and broke it until it was more than enough. Winners and losers are separated by what they choose to stare at. Poor-minded people are obsessed with what I have. They only set goals based on their current savings, their current connections, or their current skills. If they don't see the resources up front, they don't move. But a visionary is obsessed with the problem I solve. Ambition is having the stomach to take on a 5,000-person problem when you only have a 5-person budget. If you only do what you can already afford, you are not growing, you are just maintaining. Real wealth is created by the person who sees a massive need and decides to fill it, trusting that the resources will be generated through the process of execution. Stop telling yourself you can't, because you don't have the capital. The capital follows the vision, not the other way around. If your goal doesn't require a miracle or a massive stretch of your ability, your ambition is too small. Sit the crowd down and start breaking the bread you have. Jesus told a story about a master who gave gold coins to 3 servants before going on a journey. 2 of them went out, traded, risked, and doubled their money, but the 3rd servant was paralyzed by fear. He thought he was being prudent and careful. He dug a hole in the dirt and buried his gold to make sure he wouldn't lose a single cent. When the master returned, he didn't praise the servant for his safety. He was furious. He called him wicked and lazy and took everything away from him. The master wasn't angry because the servant lost money. He was angry because the servant refused to grow. The servant fell into the talent trap, the belief that playing it safe is the same as being faithful. In the real world, not losing is the fastest way to lose everything. Many people mask their cowardice as humility or caution. They say, "I'm just happy with what I have," or "I don't want to be greedy." But in the eyes of progress, stagnation is a crime. If you have a brain that can solve problems, a voice that can influence others, or a talent that can create value, and you choose to keep it hidden because you're afraid of failing or being judged, you are burying your gold. Self-doubt is not humility, it is an insult to your creator. You were given your talents to be spent, invested, and multiplied. True ambition is the responsibility to maximize every ounce of potential within you. If you have the capacity to reach 1 million people but you only choose to reach 10 because it's safer, you are failing. Don't be the fool who shows up at the end of his life with a clean, unused soul that never took a risk. Dig up your talent, put it into the market, and start multiplying. The world doesn't reward those who keep their hands clean, it rewards those who get them dirty in the pursuit of growth. The temple was supposed to be a place of prayer, but when Jesus walked in, he found a marketplace. It was filled with money changers and merchants who were price gouging the poor and turning a profit on people's spiritual needs. They had the permits, they had the tradition, and they had the backing of the religious establishment. Most people just accepted it as the way things are. But Jesus didn't look for a compromise. He didn't form a committee to discuss the issue. He braided a whip of cords, walked up to the tables and flipped them over. He sent the coins rolling across the floor and drove the corruption out with a fury that no one dared to stop. He wasn't there to be nice, he was there to be right. He was a disruptor who understood that you cannot build something holy on top of something rotten. If you want to win in this world, you must have the DNA of a disruptor. You cannot change your industry, your family legacy, or your bank account while trying to keep everyone happy. Real ambition requires the gut-wrenching courage to challenge the way things have always been done. Most people are terrified of flipping tables because they are addicted to the approval of the crowd. They see corruption in their workplace, inefficiency in their business, or toxic habits in their own lives, and they stay silent because they don't want to cause a scene. But if you are too afraid to upset the status quo, you are destined to be a victim of it. You will spend your entire life sitting at a table eating leftovers because you lacked the spine to flip it and build a better one. True success belongs to the man who is willing to be the bad guy in the eyes of the corrupt, to become a hero in the eyes of the future. Stop asking for permission to be great. If the system is broken, don't try to fit in, break it and start over. Jesus was at a high-profile dinner party when he noticed something embarrassing. Everyone was scrambling for the seats of honor near the host. They were pushing and shoving to look important, trying to signal a status they hadn't actually earned. Jesus watched the ego play and gave them a cold lesson in social strategy. He told them, when you are invited, do not sit in the best place, because if someone more important arrives, the host will ask you to move to the back in front of everyone. Instead, sit in the lowest place. Then, the host will come to you and say, "Friend, move up to a better seat." Then you will be honored in front of everyone. This wasn't just a lesson in manners, it was a masterclass in rational ambition. He was teaching them how to play the long game of status and influence. The biggest mistake ambitious people make is trying to look like a boss before they have the balance sheet to back it up. They want the title, the VIP table, and the expensive car before they've even built a foundation. This is poverty ego. Real networking, real upward mobility, is about extreme self-awareness. It's about being the logic of the high table. When you enter a new room or a new industry, don't try to be the loudest person there. Don't fake an authority you don't have. Instead, take the lowest seat. Focus on being useful. Focus on building your skill set in silence. When you provide undeniable value, the host, the market, the leaders, the high-level players will eventually find you and pull you up. True power is when the position seeks you out because of your results, not because you begged for it. Stay humble in the basement while you sharpen your blade, so that when you finally move to the penthouse, nobody can question why you belong there. Stop chasing status. Start building the value that makes status inevitable. The disciples were walking down a dusty road, and a heated argument broke out. They weren't arguing about theology or prayer, they were arguing about ego. Who among us is the greatest? They asked. They were measuring greatness by who would sit on the highest throne, who would give the orders, and who would be served by the masses. They saw leadership as a vertical ladder, where the person at the top looks down on everyone else. Jesus listened to their bickering, but he didn't give them a lecture on humility. Instead, he did something that made everyone in the room incredibly uncomfortable. He stood up, took off his outer garment, tied a towel around his waist, and poured water into a basin. Then, the man they called Master knelt in the dirt and began to wash their filthy, calloused feet. He handled the grime and the stench that no one else wanted to touch. When he finished, he looked at them and flipped their entire world upside down. If you want to be the first, you must be the last. If you want to be the greatest, you must be the servant of all. In the marketplace, most people think power is defined by how many people work for you. They want the title, the corner office, and the ability to dictate terms. But in the real world of high-level success, Power is defined by how many people you work for. Your wealth, your influence, and your status are nothing more than the overflow of the value you provide to society. If you want to be the boss, you have to be the person who solves the problems that everyone else is running away from. You have to be willing to get your hands dirty with the difficult tasks, the high-stakes risks, and the complex messes that others are too lazy or too scared to handle. Influence isn't something you demand with a business card. It's something you earn by becoming indispensable. The greatest person in any room is the one who carries the most weight for the most people. Stop asking who is going to serve me and start asking what massive problem can I solve for the world. When you become the ultimate solution, the world will have no choice but to make you the leader. The atmosphere was heavy with a sense of looming disaster. Everyone knew that Jerusalem was a death trap for Jesus. The religious elites were plotting, the Roman soldiers were on high alert, and his own friends were whispering for him to take a detour, to stay safe, to wait for a better time. But the narrative describes a terrifying shift in his demeanor. It says he steadfastly set his face toward Jerusalem. He didn't glance to the left or the right. He didn't stop to poll the audience or ask for a second opinion. He turned his entire being into a flint-faced arrow aimed directly at the center of the conflict. He knew exactly what was waiting for him, the betrayal, the trial, and the end, but he marched toward it with a cold, calculated certainty that silenced every objection. He wasn't trying to go to Jerusalem. He was already there in his mind. The physical walk was just a formality. Top-tier ambition is not the desire to win, it is the necessity to win. Most people fail because their goals are optional. They have a plan B and a safety net, so the moment the world starts screaming at them to stop, they listen. But when you have set your face toward Jerusalem, you develop a level of execution that borders on the inhuman. The criticism of your neighbors becomes white noise. The obstacles in your path become invisible. The fear that paralyzes others becomes the fuel that drives your engine. You don't look back at the good old days or the comforts you left behind, because a man with a fixed destination has no use for a rear-view mirror. Winners are dangerous because they have reached a state of unstoppable march. They have already accepted the cost, so the threats no longer work on them. If your goal is big enough, the world will eventually get out of your way. Not because it likes you, but because it realizes that stopping you is impossible. Stop hoping for success and start fixing your face on the target. Once you decide that the mission is non-negotiable, the victory is already yours.